Somebody on Twitter asked, put this question out there for everyone. What advice would you give to your teenage self? And so I know exactly what advice I would give. I would say to my teenage self, invent the Snuggie, which is just a blanket with arms. Make a couple of $1,000,000 off of that, invest it in Netflix and Amazon stock, and then go build a compound in the wilderness and drop off the grid for good, because things are going to get pretty weird, and you might want to avoid it as best you can. All right, the March for Life is happening today in D.C., which is why I'm wearing my "Make Unborn Babies Great Again" shirt. Hundreds of thousands of pro-lifers taken to the street, calling for an end to abortion. That's what's happening right now. The hideous evil of abortion is what they're standing up against. Now, it's not going to get anywhere close to the kind of media coverage, of course, that literally any other march of this size would get and has gotten, which, by the way, is a very small category. So when I say marches of this size, there aren't very many other marches that fit into that category. There have rarely in American history been marches the size of just your average, ordinary annual March for Life. The so-called Women's March a few years back. Now, that may have been around the same size, and think about all the media coverage that thing got. But that was one march. That was just one time. They couldn't sustain it. And the incredible thing about the March for Life is that they do this every year, year after year, year in, year out, for 40 plus years and counting. And there is always a huge turnout every single time. And they do it in the winter too. Okay, they do it in the dead of winter where it's very cold. A lot of times there's snow on the ground like there is now, and there's ice. If they move the march to like April or May, and they also didn't have competing marches, because that's the other thing. There are other marches for life around the country in other cities, some today, some at other points in January. So if they were to boil it down to one march and then do it in April or do it in May, I think they could easily get 1,000,000 people or more. But even with those disadvantages, they still get hundreds of thousands of people. Now, I'm not gonna give you a whole speech about the march. You've heard it before from me. You already know how I feel about the March for Life, and you know how I feel about the aims of the March for Life. But there's one thing about the March for Life that I just wanted to highlight. I wanted you to notice. It's a really obvious thing, but it's easy to overlook. And this is the profound thing that separates the March for Life from pretty much any other kind of march. Aside from the turnout, the other thing that separates it is this. Nobody is there to march for themselves, okay? Nobody is demanding anything for themselves. Just think about that. Nobody, not one single person, if there are 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 people in the march, not a single one of them is going to be there marching for their own rights. Because everybody marching has already been born. If we're not counting the many pregnant women that are going to be there with babies in the womb. So all the people who made the choice to get into a car or a bus and drive to the march, they're marching there. They are there for others, okay? They're there for those who cannot be there. In any other kind of march that you can think of, it's always people there for the most part. Now, there may be some people who show up who are, there to support, but for the most part, predominantly, in any other kind of march, the people there are saying, I want my rights. I want respect for me and dignity and whatever else for myself. And there's nothing wrong with that. If the cause is just, then there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with marching for your own rights. It's a good thing to do, an American thing to do. The problem, of course, with the Women's March is that they weren't marching for their own rights because women already have, to the exclusion of unborn females, women already have all the same rights as men. So they weren't marching for it. They already have all the rights. What they wanted was, like free birth control and those kinds of things. So they were demanding things that are not rights They were demanding extra entitlements, so that is an unjust cause. But there are plenty of other rights and demonstrations that have happened throughout history, throughout American history, where the cause was just and it's good that people came to demand their rights. But in this case, the people who are being deprived of their rights cannot march for obvious reasons. So others are there in their place. And here's the other powerful thing. Despite what you may be told, and I want you to, if you can't make it out to the march, if you're not going to be there, after the march has happened, try to find some footage of it. It's going to be kind of difficult to find actual footage of the march because the mainstream media, they're not going to show you. Now they might mention it. They might make a quick mention of, anti-abortion demonstrators are in DC, or what they'll like to say is something like, people are in DC today demonstrating on either side of the abortion issue. Meanwhile, there are 400,000 pro-lifers and like 10 pro-abortion people, and the mainstream media will portray it as if it's kind of an even split, right? But what they won't do, they won't show you a huge kind of panoramic view of all the people who showed up. They're not going to show you that. So it might be hard to find it, but if you go to like pro-life sites, LifeSite News or something like that, you can find it. And I would recommend, or go on social media, go on Twitter, and look at the pictures, because what you're going to notice is that despite what you're told, it's not a bunch of old white men there who are trying to control women's bodies. Now, there are going to be some old white men, which, great, God bless them. They are needed in the movement as well. But most of the participants in the March for Life, and most pro-life activists in general, are younger, and most are women. So these are young women, predominantly. So think about that. Not only are these young women marching for others, aside from themselves, but they're marching demanding laws that would, in a sense, restrict their own legal rights. Okay, they are marching demanding laws that would deprive themselves of certain legal powers that they currently possess. So they're saying, no, these women who march in the March for Life, what they're saying is, no, I should not have the right or the ability or the power to take innocent life. I should not have that right. That is not a real human right. I shouldn't have it. Take it from me. And in exchange, give basic human dignity and human rights to the unborn. Now that's a really powerful message, isn't it? Think about that message. Think about how unprecedented it is for a message like that. Especially in this day and age when people are constantly prattling on about rights they don't have. They have all the rights in the world and now they want more. They want entitlements. They want this, they want that. But these women who are at the March for Life, and women in the pro-life movement generally, they are saying exactly the opposite. They're saying, yes, I want all of my God-given human rights, but the right to kill a child, that is not a God-given human right. I should not have that right. Take it away. Give rights to the child. What a powerful, beautiful message. And as I said, unprecedented. All right. Let's talk about something a little less inspiring. Representative Omar, who's a Democrat, is making insinuations about Senator Lindsey Graham. Now, it's important, just for some background reference here, just so you understand how despicable this is, the thing that we're talking about is, there has long been a rumor in DC that Lindsey Graham is gay, okay? A rumor as in it's just something that his political enemies will sometimes say or insinuate. It's just an implication, whispers, right? I'm not aware of there being any truth to it or basis for it whatsoever at all. But you need to know that this rumor exists so that you can understand what the Democrats are doing here. So a guy named Qasim Rashid calls himself an Islamic educator, said on Twitter this week in reaction to Lindsey Graham's kind of change of tone about Donald Trump over the past few years, Rashid said, "I can't even imagine what they have on Graham." Now, there's an obvious implication there. if you're aware of the rumors and you say, well, I can't imagine what they might have on him, it's really obvious what you're trying to imply. And then Representative Omar, a Democrat, sitting member of Congress, she responds with her own tweet and she says, they got to him, he is compromised. So that's not even like she's saying her opinion or she's presenting this as a theory. She's saying, no, they got to him. He is compromised. What does she mean by that? Well, she was pressed on this by CNN. CNN did a rare bit of actual journalism, actually pressing a Democrat. And here's how that conversation went. Now, so you see there, she's trying to backpedal a little bit and she's trying to leave the insinuation sort of dangling out there for people so they know it and understand it, but she's not, but that's the point of the insinuation. She's not going to say it. She's not going to come right out and say it because she's also a coward. Meanwhile, MSNBC anchor Stephanie Rule has gotten in on the act as well. Here she is on MSNBC a couple of days ago, kind of feeding into this rumor as well. Okay, so you see how this goes, right? Liberals spend all day insisting that all lifestyles are great and equal and wonderful, and they should all be accepted and so on. But then they will not hesitate to imply that a person is gay in order to insult or discredit them. And they do this all the time with conservatives, not just with Lindsey Graham, but any conservative who stands up for biblical marriage or talks about this issue at all. What you're going to hear from liberals is, oh, I bet he's hiding something. Yeah, he we all know what's going on with that guy. Which of course is ridiculous for a number of reasons. But anyway, so what if he is hiding something? That should be a total non-story, right? To you as a liberal, it should be a non-issue to you. So you're implying that Lindsey Graham is gay. That is a libelous, despicable thing to do, to make implications with someone with no evidence or anything like that, to feed into rumors. But even aside from that, what does it matter to you? That should be a non-issue, non-story to you. And not only that, but if somebody were gay and they were hiding it for whatever reason, then you should respect their right to come out, when and how and if they choose, right? But that's not what happens. And this is even leaving aside, by the way, this whole thing with Lindsey, this idea that he's being blackmailed, or what's going on with Lindsey Graham. He changed his tune. He was against Trump. Now he's for him. Actually, Lindsey Graham came out against Trump yesterday because of the letter that Trump sent to Pelosi canceling her travel plans, which I thought that letter was great, by the way, and hilarious. Lindsey Graham came out against it and said it was sophomoric and he didn't like it. So look, I disagree with Lindsey Graham a lot. But it does appear to me, for the most part, he just calls it as he sees it. So he's come out strongly against Trump, and he's strongly defended him. And if you're trying to figure out, well, why is he against him here and for? Could it maybe just be that he agrees with Trump on this issue and not on that issue? And I respect that. Even if I disagree with where Graham lands on certain issues, it would appear that he's just saying how he feels and reacting to the situation as it comes up. So there's, on top of how despicable it is to feed into rumors, it doesn't even make any sense to even be getting into this. Because considering Lindsey Graham is still one of the senators who is willing to criticize Trump and has criticized him plenty of times, including as recently as like 12 hours ago. All right, running through a few other stories here. I wanted to mention this before the week is up. According to a recent survey, Americans spend nearly half of all of their waking hours, 42%, staring at screens. Like I am doing right now and like you are doing right now. So whether TV, computer, phone, whatever, Americans are spending half the day looking at a screen of some kind. And this, of course, is not surprising. And it also isn't surprising, according to another recent survey, A third of all people say they would not be able to live without screens. It's such an integral part of their day, they can't imagine life without it. Meanwhile, a new study from the National Institute of Health says that kids who spend a couple of hours a day, let alone half the day, but even just say 2 hours a day looking at screens, tend to score lower on language tests. There have been many studies of this kind, all finding similar things, talking about the detrimental effects of screen time on kids and on adults. Although another study made headlines recently, so there are studies all over the place going back and forth, but this one made headlines by going against the grain. So reading now from the website sciencealert.com, it says leading pediatricians said there is little evidence that shows screen time is toxic for children, even after other research suggested that just a few hours a day could damage developing brains. New guidelines or guidance for under 18-year-olds from the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health in the UK said that evidence that time in front of a screen has a negative effect on children is, quote, contested, and that, quote, the evidence of harm is often overstated. The evidence is so weak, according to the group, that it could not offer parents a guide for how much they should be limiting their children's screen time. Again, this doesn't meld with what most studies have found. It also just doesn't track with our basic common sense. Of course it's bad for you to spend half of your life staring at a screen. Of course that's bad for you. I mean, to spend half your day doing anything is probably not good for you, unless we're talking about breathing, in which case you probably spend a little bit more than half your day doing it. But especially something as sort of sedentary and lethargic and passive and unthinking as just sitting there staring at a screen. The effects of that, I think, are literally immeasurable.